For many years, Honkai was a concept we knew almost nothing about. But that is the case no more. With the dawn of the latest story arc, the true nature behind this previously unexplained phenomenon was revealed. After 6 years barely scratching the surface of this concept, chapters 33 and 34 finally gave us permanent brain damage, but also some much needed answers. The only thing I urge you to keep in mind is that the concept of Honkai is still hard to grasp and it requires some personal interpretation to present it in a cohesive video format. As even more information could be revealed in the future, some things may change or prove to be outright false. In my opinion, Honkai is not something that can have a universally true explanation. It's an alien concept to humanity that our minds weren't made to fully comprehend. It's like explaining physics to a dog. So, by saying that Honkai is that or that Honkai is this, it's like taking one layer of an onion and saying, "Look, this is an onion," when in fact it's not, it's just one layer of the onion. The true onion are all the layers on top of each other, but because each character sees a different layer of the onion, they also use different analogies when talking about it. So what I want to do is go through each layer of the Honkai Onion and explain it separately. Honkai is an unknown force that rises with the advancements of human civilization. This is the oldest and most simple definition that, well, turned out to be kinda wrong. Welt confirms in chapter 34 that this was more of an assumption and that in reality all the flow of Honkai Energy is controlled by the cocoon of Finality, this giant meatball from the moon. Yes, there might be small correlations between humanity's technological advancements and how active the cocoon of Finality is, but that's a much more complex situation. It's better to say that Honkai rises when it thinks that humanity is ready for its embrace and a more advanced civilization is more prepared. Selene failed in the previous era because no matter how much Honkai energy it converted, the cocoon would just bring out more. There wasn't just a set amount of Honkai energy present, depending on how advanced they were. Oh! And did I mention that humanity is also trapped in a freaking 50,000 years old samsara by the Finality? So how advanced we are doesn't matter anyways, because after 50,000 years everything resets. But let's go into more details about this in the next section. This perspective was offered by Atto in chapter 17. By this point, we started to explore more into the cosmology of the Honkai universe, tackling concepts such as the Sea of Quanta and the Imaginary Tree. So we kinda knew that Honkai must be related to those concepts. Atto calls Honkai a corrective system in the Imaginary Tree that breeds, nurtures, tests, and removes civilizations. Now that we have some context, I can say that he wasn't really wrong. We know that Honkai does indeed come from the Imaginary Tree, and what it does can be indeed interpreted as a test. My qualms with this are the fact that Atto calls it a system in the Imaginary Tree, which is not quite true in my opinion. Rather than a universal system, Honkai is more so the influence of a higher being from the Imaginary Tree that we refer to as the Finality. Sure, you can argue that it's just semantics, but I wanted to point this out. In Atto's interpretation, I believe that the word test refers to the evolution of human civilization. Kevin mentioned at some point that Finality wants to embrace humanity. It's important to note that in this context, embrace refers to the fact that Finality wants to force humanity to evolve. Tesla said in chapter 34 that each Herrscher is like an embrace from its power, and that Finality has the authority of time because it functions on a trial and error basis. If the embrace fails to force humanity's evolution, it resets everything and tries again. Now, if that's the case, the new question is why? Dr. May calls it a civilization that became one will, implying that finality is just a higher form of civilization that seeks out less advanced civilizations on the imaginary tree that have the potential to evolve and become part of it. It's like us taking some literal monkeys and force them to evolve into humans, but on a cosmic scale. So, in my opinion, this is the test that Ado was talking about. We pass when we can find a way to evolve and become a part of finality. The only thing that seems to have changed from Ado's explanation is that if we fail, we know now that the samsara is reset. We do not fall into the sea of quanta like it was previously stated, but from chapter 32 we learn that finality's powers can in fact create multiple bubble universes from the impact it has on the world when it resets the samsara. This is the concept of Honkai looked at through the lenses of philosophy and is closely tied to Plato's theory of forms. Prometheus says that reality binds fiction. In this context, fiction means anything imaginary that is not constrained by the limitations of our reality. Imaginary space is a space where concepts and ideas exist freely without being bound by any laws. In short, they can simply exist as Platonic ideals. Honkai is essentially the entire concept of fiction existing in a way that is virtually incomprehensible to humanity. Herrschers rule over some concepts like reason, void, domination, or death. These concepts are all narratives that humanity itself has come up with, and they have a meaning that most people will understand. Herrschers are the rulers of said concepts, and they hate being bound by reality and its laws. In a sense, you can say that Honkai is using humanity's concepts and ideas against them. The reason why Honkai tries to destroy humanity is precisely because of this exact opposing nature of our existence. Humanity represents a shared story of many, while Honkai likes to be the protagonist. While in the imagination of a writer, the story can be anything and it's free to develop into endless possibilities. But the moment the writer uses its pen to transcribe the story from his imagination to reality, that's when fiction gets trapped in a cage. How many times have you seen people write fanfiction or do fan art of some moments in a story that they wanted to see but never got the chance? Our need for making fanfiction stems from a collective desire to take control over a narrative and free it from the author. That is the exact same reason why the imaginary wages war against reality, and that's why the previous era Herrschers had such a strong hatred towards humanity. If you want a deeper understanding of this interpretation, I recommend to watch my video about Project Stigma, where I go into more details. This explanation is easier to understand because it's more science fiction and less philosophy. But even so, it created a lot of misunderstandings in the community. To explain the concepts behind the Honkai, the characters have to use a lot of analogies, and sometimes, depending on how they use them and how accurate the English localization is, those analogies can do more harm than good. I saw so many people thinking that Honkai is some kind of lonely god that just sits in a dark corner of the universe and is looking for friends. And while this is not really wrong on a conceptual level, people are looking at it through very shallow lenses. We are talking about a higher form of existence that we cannot understand, so we use analogies like embrace, love, and lonely to simplify it. These are not meant to be taken literally. Anyway, Dr. May speculates that finality is just a more advanced form of a civilization where the individuals became one will, similar to the spiritual Adam that Project Stigma wants to create. It's a sort of cosmic collective consciousness that is looking to grow, to expand, so it instinctively looks for other forms of civilization that have the potential to become part of it and tries to force their evolution into imaginary beings like itself that can coexist with it. Project Stigma tries to find some sort of compromise by spreading the embrace of finality evenly to the new humans and making them coexist with finality. This way, humanity won't be completely gone and its ideas can still continue to exist as forms. Finality doesn't have any ill will, love, or any kind of human emotion. It's more like an instinct. It's a cosmic level entity that we cannot comprehend, so we use simple human analogies to make sense of its behavior. Please don't take them literally. What you should take literally instead is me saying to subscribe to the channel and give this video a thumbs up to get more Honkai related content. A question I see asked a lot is if Honkai and finality are the same thing. Short answer, yes. Long answer, not really. Here is my interpretation. Honkai, in its essence, is energy from imaginary space. Let's call it imaginary energy. In its natural state, the energy lies in imaginary space and doesn't do much. But under the influence of a will advanced enough to control it, the energy can be brought in lower dimensions and bent to the will of that higher entity. We have seen even humans have a certain degree of control over imaginary energy. A good example would be Durandal's photo from chapter 34 that shared her memories with Siegfried and Kiana. That photo is an imaginary construct made from Durandal's memories. In my humble opinion, Honkai is imaginary energy under the influence of finality, which is a higher form of existence than the imaginary tree and has a much more advanced control over the imaginary energy. Since finality has no real form, it projected itself in the world of Honkai Impact 3rd in the form of the cocoon of finality, from where it can bring and control the imaginary energy. The imaginary energy under the influence of finality is what we call Honkai. So, finality equals a higher form of existence, Honkai equals energy from imaginary space under finality's control. Again, this is my personal interpretation. I'm sure that chapter 35 will give us more answers. Now this is a topic I want to talk about for quite some time. In chapter 31 EX, we found out that the Will of Honkai is actually a version of Prometheus, an AI created by Dr. May to assist in fighting the Honkai. In the last moments of the previous era, Prometheus hacked the cocoon of finality and forced it to repeat the same Herrschers cycle in the new era and give Kevin the authority of finality. Note that this implies that even if the samsara keeps repeating, the Herrschers are not necessarily the same, and this makes sense given the whole trial and error functionality of finality. If the Herrscher of the Void failed in the previous cycle, why send it again? This is also a really nice reference to the myth of Prometheus, who in Greek mythology stole the fire from gods and gave it to humans. But, in my opinion, Prometheus and the Will of Honkai are not exactly the same existence. Mobius clearly said in the same chapter that Prometheus will lose its human-like way of thinking and become part of finality. I see the Will of Honkai more like an avatar of finality that has been programmed to do certain things by the previous era, and its existence as Prometheus has been completely lost. Oh boy, now here we have some big revelations. In chapter 34, we learn that Herrschers aren't actual Herrschers. Or, to be more exact, they are lesser versions of a true Herrscher. The meatball of the cocoon of Finality is actually one giant Herrscher core, and the other Herrscher cores are just projections of its powers through different dimensions. This means that the only true Herrscher is the Herrscher of Finality, and all the other Herrschers are like shadows of its power. Anti-Entropy's plan to stop the Honkai is to create an artificial Herrscher of Finality and let humanity take direct control over its authority to stop the Samsara and block the imaginary singularity from the cocoon to bring more Honkai energy into reality. Because Sirin could wield 6 authorities without losing herself, Anti-Entropy wants to gather all the Herrscher authorities and make Kiana into an artificial Herrscher of Finality. But more on that plan in another video. Oh, and chapter 34 also reveals that there are no Herrscher personas in the current era. What we thought that it was a Herrscher persona in May's case was actually the will inside her stigma this whole time. You see, May had a natural stigmata that gave birth to a will, similar to Red Cele, when her father implanted the Gem of Conquest inside her to save her life. This caused May to think that the other will was created by the Honkai, but in fact it was her stigma all along. Honestly, this makes more sense given what we know about Alicia's sacrifice. Is it a retcon? I mean, yeah, probably. I saw some people bringing Anna up and how she fought over control with her Herrscher persona, and while I see where they are coming from, these recent chapters also imply that a person can just lose control of themselves as a Herrscher if they are not well suited to adapt to that power. What happened with Anna was more like her going berserk and losing control over her own will. We never saw a Herrscher persona in there. The characters assumed that she was fighting one because they didn't know at that time that Honkai has no influence over Herrschers in this era. Because of the Sky People and the Sugars, we know that Honkai is not limited only to the world of Honkai Impact 3rd. But that begs the question, does this higher form of existence have a different name in other worlds? And oh boy, you'd be surprised. If you played through the beta of Honkai Star Rail, there was an interesting message on one of the loading screens that talked about a being called Terminus, and I quote, "The Aeon that moves backwards in time and presides over the path of finality." Sounds familiar? Finality? Time? Aeon? Not to mention that the loading screen is accompanied by this very familiar symbol. Look, I don't want to say anything since we lack evidence to make a foolproof connection, but there is a very high chance that this higher form of civilization on the imaginary tree that caused the Honkai to appear in the universe of Honkai Impact 3rd is Terminus, the Aeon that resides over the path of finality. Oh, and I also think that the Sky People could be the Okay, look, I have no freaking idea how to pronounce this. Who are worshippers of the Aeon Terminus said to await their encounter with him. So, what is Honkai? Well, it's a test. It's fiction. It's destiny. It's an alien civilization from a higher dimension that wants to eat us. It's an evolution mechanism. It's a natural disaster. It's a concept beyond our understanding. Honkai can be interpreted and understood on a very large scale, and while none of these interpretations are particularly wrong, they will also never be able to encapsulate its whole meaning.